Oh, it looks like we're here. It looks like we're here, Internet. We have arrived again. Let me just make sure we're over on the YouTube. Here we come. Here we come. We had a glitch earlier. This morning, so don't want to jinx it now. But I am joined. Welcome to Get Your News On with Ron, everybody. We got a guest today. We got an interview segment, and I'm really excited to have this guy. I got to collaborate with him in the Senate building in Washington, D.C. when we showed up to Mitch McConnell's office to deliver a petition. We delivered 3.5 million petitions for net neutrality. Mitch McConnell was not in his office. He was staying in his shell, but we still got to deliver those petitions to the office. It was an amazing moment. I am joined today by Mark Stanley from Demand Progress. Mark, how are you today, my man?
Hey, Ron. How's it going? Good to see you.
Good to see you again. So, Mark, one of the things Demand Progress is that, well, first of all, let's backtrack a little bit here. I don't want to get too far ahead right away. Give people a quick crash course on what Demand Progress is. What are they all about?
Yeah, so we are a Netroots organization. We have over 2 million people on our mailing list, and we focus on issues like internet freedom, civil liberties, fighting concentrated power. And so one of the main issues that we focus on and have been focusing on for a number of years is net neutrality.
So right now there is a pledge out there, and I saw that this week. I was really excited to see it. It is a pledge for candidates coming up here in 2020, and they can take the pledge to support net neutrality. So what all is in that pledge?
Yeah, so we launched this pledge because, and Ron, like you mentioned, last time we saw each other was actually in Washington, D.C., and we were doing a petition delivery to Mitch McConnell. And the petition delivery was for people who were calling for McConnell to allow a vote on the Save the Internet Act, which is legislation that passed the House earlier this year. And it would basically restore the net neutrality protections that the FCC repealed in 2017. So that legislation passed the House. A lot of organizations, including Demand Progress, worked really hard to get that legislation passed. Millions of people spoke out in favor of that legislation. And unfortunately, like we've seen with a lot of bills that have passed the House, it's basically just stalled out in the Senate. McConnell said, I think the day that the bill passed in the House, or maybe the day before, that it was going to be dead on arrival in the Senate. And so what we've done, while we've continued to push members of the Senate to co-sponsor the legislation and to try to get a vote on it, we figured at this point, seeing how things are stalled out in the Senate, it was important to make sure that any future president was committed to restoring net neutrality. And they can do that by appointing FCC commissioners who would restore the rules that were repealed by the FCC in 2017. Beyond that, the pledge also calls for presidential candidates to pledge to reject campaign contributions from the telecom industry. And we think that's an important point because, I think one of the reasons that the telecom industry has been able to, with some success, push policies, including, anti-net neutrality measures in DC is because of the outsized influence that they exercise in Washington. And a lot of that is through campaign contributions.
So where can people go right now? Like, where can elected officials go to sign the pledge? Where can people go to pressure their elected officials to sign this pledge?
Yeah, so we have the pledge up on Action Network. If you go to Demand Progress's Twitter page, you can find it there. We've been tweeting about it a lot. We're at Demand Progress, and we're asking candidates to sign this pledge. And the idea is a lot. So, and the idea too is that a lot of candidates have come out and said that they do support net neutrality.
Right.
The idea on this is to be more specific. We lay out some specific policy points that we think are important to hit. And also we have the point about rejecting, contributions from the telecom industry. And so we're asking candidates to sign this pledge specifically. It's also backed by almost 20 Netroots groups that have been fighting for net neutrality for quite some time, including Demand Progress, as well as Fight for the Future, Color of Change, Free Press, Action, and a number of other organizations.
Who has signed it so far?
So far, we just launched it this week. We haven't heard back from any candidates about this pledge specifically. We're going to continue to pressure them and to reach out to them, I should say, in the coming weeks, days and weeks to get them to sign. I mean, I think we have seen so far a number of candidates, including Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. They have committed to appointing commissioners who would restore the net neutrality protections that were repealed by the FCC. What we're asking candidates to do is to go a step further and say, and sign this pledge specifically.
Yeah, I mean, and it's one of those things. I mean, Bernie in particular has said some pretty promising things as of recent. I mean, he also is the first 2020 candidate, and as far as I know, the only 2020 candidate to really lay out a plan for universal broadband across the country as well. Elizabeth Warren has touched on that a little bit as well. Not to the extent Bernie has. Plus, I mean, you don't have to weigh in on this one way or another, but I kind of feel like Liz Warren is a little wishy-washy on a lot of things. But that is also in the conversation. So hopefully we'll get some signatures on this thing soon. So is it available on Demand Progress's website specifically? Like, can you find it on your all's website?
Yeah, it's on the website, and I think the best place to find it right now is on our Twitter page. We've been tweeting about it quite a bit.
Okay, so that's at Demand Progress on Twitter, and demandprogress.org is just the general website, and they can find the pledge there. Is there a way for people to send it specifically to their representatives, or a way for people to contact the representatives about this pledge specifically?
Yeah, if you go to the link for the pledge, and we can maybe, I don't know if we can maybe feature that somewhere on the video that gets posted. But yeah, it's basically, there's a way that you can sign the petition, contact your members of Congress, or not contact you can sign the petition basically asking the campaigns to take the pledge. And the idea too is that, with net neutrality, there's always been a huge grassroots movement behind it, a lot of grassroots energy. And so by turning this into a petition that people can actually sign, the idea is to show, like, once again, the grassroots are paying attention to this issue and really want the candidates to take this pledge specifically. After you take the pledge, you can also, we direct people to a tool where they can call their members of Congress. Because while we're getting candidates to, hopefully come out in support of restoring net neutrality, it is important that we also keep pressure up in Congress to get them to pass this legislation that would restore the rules. There's no reason that any lawmaker shouldn't be supporting this legislation. It's something that, overwhelming majorities of voters have supported. One poll showed that 86% of Americans, Republicans and Democrats alike, actually opposed the FCC's repeal of net neutrality. So
well, that's why we were doing the thing we were doing, because, I mean, we knew, look, the Senate will probably, the Save the Internet bill, which was a great bill, we knew it probably wasn't going to pass the Senate. If they did vote on it, we knew Trump would likely veto it as well. But let's force the vote, because let's have all these people going on the record going either for or against net neutrality, and let's hope that it hurts them in the ballot box in the future.
Yeah, this strange thing has happened with net neutrality, where the polling, like I said, I mean, poll after poll, it shows overwhelming support from voters across the board. And yet in Washington, especially in Congress, this strange thing has happened where it's broken down among partisan lines, but not so
very strange. I wonder. Yeah,
right.
So I wonder why it's happening that way.
Not so strange, it turns out. You do a little bit of light digging, and you find out pretty quickly, that the telecom industry, we're talking about Comcast, Verizon, really, giant monopolistic, duopolistic
AT&T, and
internet providers. Yeah, they are continuously, among the companies that are, contributing the most to politicians in Washington. And I think they've done a good job. I think the strategy has been to turn this into a partisan issue. So they've done an effective job, I would say, at getting Republicans to, for some reason, view this, well, again, not for some reason, but to view this through a political lens. That said, it's politically, I think it's an extremely horrible calculation for Republicans. I mean, the polling on this is, as far as support for net neutrality goes, it's just about as high as any polling on any issue I've seen, because it's such a no-brainer. Nobody trusts their phone or their cable company to decide what websites they can access, to decide what their internet and online experience is. And it really is a no-brainer. And so what we've seen in Washington, though, is that this has, at least as far as the legislation goes, it has broken down along partisan lines, and that's really unfortunate because, like I said, all voters really support this issue.
Yeah, because we want a free and open internet, and net neutrality assures a free and open internet. So last question, I want to throw this at you, and this is sort of like a little bit of a deviation, and you can
Mhm.
just, give your opinion one way or another. If you don't want to give one, that's okay too. But I have a theory. So when you look at all these mergers,
Mhm.
it all like Walt Disney and their recent merger, AT&T, Time Warner, all these mergers, there's something that they all have in common. First of all, one has access to a lot of content and a lot of
Mhm.
material. The other has access to a video streaming service.
Right.
I think this is by design. I think what they're really trying to do is that they want to eventually turn the internet into cable television 2.0, which they can do in a post net neutrality world. And they want to essentially kind of have their streaming services out there, have their content out there, direct all people to that, and kind of squash any and all competition. Do you think that's what's going on? Or am I reading too much into it?
No, I don't think so. I think the acquisition of content companies by telecom providers, I think it's extremely alarming. And we have seen for example, AT&T's purchase of Time Warner. And so there's this part of the pledge that we talk about something called zero rating, and we ask candidates
Right.
to specifically pledge to prohibit zero rating. And this is a form of ensuring a free and open internet that, we talk about no blocking, no throttling, no paid prioritization. These are often the things that come up when you talk about net neutrality. So no blocking websites, no charging websites to reach customers faster than other websites, which is
Or
paid prioritization.
charging customers for certain websites too.
And no throttling. We have
Right.
seen instances of throttling. There was just a report that actually Bloomberg just had a report that AT&T has been throttling services like Netflix and YouTube at like an extremely alarming rate. Throttling is not always it's not always the easiest thing to detect. It's just like a slowing of services. So it's not like it's a black and white sort of thing that you're able to easily detect. But the evidence that it's happening more and more is becoming more apparent. But on zero rating, this is the idea that an internet provider that also has a streaming service, they can't basically give their customers free access to that streaming service, because what that's going to do is that's going to completely disadvantage other
Right.
video streaming services. And so I think with the acquisition of content companies that are happening by these ISPs, that part of it is more and more important.
Well, and that's the thing too, and I'm glad you brought up the zero rating thing. That was something that first got birthed, to my knowledge at least, in the net neutrality bill that we had here in California. That addressed zero rating, and of course, that's being battled out in the courts now. The FCC sued California for their net neutrality bill, as we knew it was going to happen. But the whole zero rating thing, it's like some people, they look at that and they're like, well, I kind of like the idea that I can use this certain video thing and it won't count against my data cap. That saves me money, right? And it's like, well, first of all, not really. Second of all, what happens is when you don't have a protection like this in place, it's going to lead to what we talked about, where some video streaming services are going to squash others, and it's going to lead to a much different internet than as we know it today. So, Mark, one more time, where can people go to act now?
So if you go to Demand Progress's Twitter account at Demand Progress, you'll see links to this pledge that we've been tweeting out, as well as news articles that it's gotten. And we've also been tagging candidates, asking them to sign this pledge. So if you want to retweet that, that'd be extremely helpful. We're hoping that they sign this pledge specifically. And the whole idea is that it's not enough to just simply say you support net neutrality at this point. We want to get specific. We want to talk about reinstating strong Title II rules that were repealed by the FCC, banning harmful zero rating that we were just talking about, and rejecting contributions from the telecom industry, specifically execs, lobbyists, and PACs. Because again, the reason that's important, we know the reason that the telecom industry has been able to push extremely unpopular policies like net neutrality repeal is because they have undue influence in Washington. That a lot of that comes from their ability to give out millions in campaign contributions.
And as you said, they're very effective at it. There's a very diplomatic way of saying, hey, when it comes to being evil, they're knocking it out of the park. They're nailing it. They're crushing it. Mark, thank you so much for doing this. Thank you so much for all of your work at Demand Progress. You guys are doing amazing things. I've seen you work on the ground. You're an amazing leader. You do amazing things. You were awesome in the Senate building. That was such a fun day. And I look forward to us crossing paths again soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Ron. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, buddy.